Okay, greetings and welcome to another edition of Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. Today's date is 18th January 2026. Can't believe it's actually another year has passed. I hope you are doing well and had a good break if you had one, and relaxing time over the festive season. Now, I'm Brother Dr Toyin Agbetu. I'm in the studio flying solo today as Sister Oleander, unfortunately, has been unwell and still is unwell for a little while. Her vocal cords have gone, so she can't actually join us. I'm going to be trying to man the chats today because I'm in the studio alone. We're going to use an automated system so that what you post will come up online. So please be sensitive with your comments because I won't be able to edit them and select them and stuff like that because it'll be an automated process. But what we'll be doing over the next couple of hours is reviewing some of the community related news from over the past few weeks. So as usual, if you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. And as ever, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. I'm going to ask as ever that you give us a heads up, send a message just saying that you can hear us okay, that you can see us okay, so that we know that it's live. It will automatically come up, so I can't respond to all the individual comments, I'm afraid, because it's on a different screen over there, and I kind of have to focus over here. But it'll be useful to know that you're here and that you can you're engaging with us okay. But I'm going to move on as usual. We've got a lot to go through. I am tempted to try a different format this week. Rather than having a big image of me on the screen, I'm thinking about having a little image of me on the screen. So I'm going to try and see how that works. But let's go to the next slide. And this is the kind of, let's see if this works. We're going to do libations. And no, it didn't work. So that's the end of that one. This is the part of the program where we start with libations and share details of any recently passed or notable anniversaries. And before I go into this section proper, I want to make a mention to a colleague and friend of ours. That's when I say ours, I'm talking myself and Oleander, and the whole sickle cell support solid support group. His name was Ugo Ochukwu Nayombe, and I hope I pronounced his surname right. But Ugo, we recently found out, jointly ancestors over the festive season. I can't share much details other than to say that he went into hospital with a crisis, and it looks as though he was denied treatment because I don't want to go into too much, but because he wasn't believed. I don't know all the facts yet, and we're investigating the matter. But at this particular stage, I just want to say, pour libation for our brother Ugo. He was a lovely guy. He's been one of the founding members. He was part of the solid support group for many, many years. And it was quite a shock to all of us to hear that he had passed in this way. And we want to get to the bottom of what happened. We want to make sure that it wasn't a situation that he had been denied treatment. Because this is an old problem that used to happen where people of African heritage were seen as drug addicts when they were going to hospitals for treatment. And in this particular case, we don't know yet. We've already issued statements and letters for information. We'll keep you informed of what happens with this. Sorry, Ugo. Okay, so let me continue. So the first libation is to the pioneering psychiatrist, Dr. Agri Burke, who jointly ancestors, God, my brain's going, I think it was this month. Now, he was the NHS's first consultant of African heritage working in the field of transcultural psychiatry. He examined the role of racial discrimination in psychiatric disorders and issues of access to mental health services for people from diverse communities. Now, one of the reasons why I kind of heard of him and he came onto my radar was because in 1981, following the New Cross massacre, which is the fire which was killed at least 13 young Africans, we say 14, and it was believed to be racially motivated. He worked together with other community organisers and professionals and setting up a support group, providing vital counselling for the bereaved families. And that's when I first heard about his work. In 1984, he edited the 30th anniversary issue of the International Journal of Social Psychiatry, was dedicated to the theme of racism and mental health or mental illness. In 1986, he co-authored the groundbreaking paper exposing the colour bar, which then existed in London's medical schools, and this was titled Racial and Sexual Discrimination in the Selection of Students for London Medical Schools. And this expose meant that our ancestor, Dr. Burke, did not receive the promotions in the field which he was deserved. He was ostracized because of this work. It was groundbreaking work. He was also president of the African and Caribbean Medical Society, where he was particularly concerned with helping African students pursue careers in medicine. I think I saw an email go out that there's going to be a memorial for him soon. It might be by Black History Walks. I can't remember exactly where it was, but you might be able to find it if you go to Eventbrite and type his name in. But we remember. The next libation is to Milton Cole, and we've seen tributes being paid to this man who was described as legendary and is known as a long-standing presence at The Voice newspaper. Now, he joined the ancestors in Jamaica on the 7th of November last year. He joined The Voice during its Cold Harbour Lane years in Brixton, and while he was initially brought in to provide security, his role quickly expanded. He became known as the person people relied on, someone who knew the building, the rhythms of the office, and everyone who passed through it. For many, the mention of Milton's name, Milton Cole's, brings a smile, and he is remembered with affection, gratitude, and respect. Now, his funeral is going to take place this Saturday, well, not this Saturday, in a few weeks' time, Saturday, the 7th of February, 2026, in Ocho Rios, Jamaica, with a gathering in his honor due to happen in Brixton on the same day. And we thank Black Current News who shared this information. Milton Cole, we remember. The next libation is to Daniel Scott Horton, our sister, who was a commissioning editor and producer at the BBC, who joined the ancestors aged 37. Now, she was brought up by her Jamaican grandparents, something she treasured very deeply. She began her professional journey as a multi-talented creator, working across production, writing, and directing on various ventures, including programs like Dear Jesus and The Alexis Show. Now, prior to her tenure at the BBC, Danielle spent 7 years at Balloon Entertainment, where she held the roles of development executive and executive producer on Champion, which was a groundbreaking musical, which was by BBC and Netflix. And in her role as a commissioning editor of drama at the BBC, she played a pivotal part in the creation of many church programs, which included EastEnders, Just Act Normal, Death in Paradise, and Beyond Paradise, where she served as an executive producer on the BBC's contribution. She leaves an amazing legacy, and at 37, of course, it's way, way, way too early. We remember. The next libation is to someone like basically a legend, and this is our elder Claudette Colvin. And she is the woman who refused to give up her bus seat to a European woman in Alabama, which helped dismantle segregation in the US. Now, many people will think, hold on, isn't that Rosa Parks? Well, no. This is one of the misconceptions that people have. Rosa Parks did do this, and this did attract a lot of attention in the media. But Colvin was just 15 when she was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955. And this was after she defied the segregation laws deliberately. Her refusal to give up the seat occurred 9 months before Rosa Parks' similar act of defiance, which triggered the Montgomery boycott, leading to the Supreme Court decision to desegregate public transport. Now, in one of the first publicized acts of civil disobedience against Montgomery's Jim Crow laws, which they were called, the governing city bus seating by race, our elder, now ancestor, refused to relinquish her seat for a European woman as ordered by the driver and stayed put until she was dragged off the bus by police. Now, according to accounts of her testimony in court, she recalled that she'd been studying anti-slavery abolitionist heroes in school and felt that she had Harriet Tubman on one shoulder and Sojourner Truth on the other. And she said that history had me glued to the seat. And she went on to become one of several plaintiffs and principal witnesses in various cases challenging these policies. She joined the ancestors a hero. There's many reasons why we don't know her name, and we know Rosa Parks. And Rosa Parks also was a great heroine and a legendary heroine, but Claudette Colvin was often, her story was put to the sidelines of history due to colorism. But we remember her amazing contribution, and yeah, we remember. The next libation is to the trumpeter Eddie Tantan Fortin, who joined the ancestors aged 94. Now, he was born in Spanish Town, Jamaica in 1931. And in the 1960s, he played on many hits, including the Beatles' Got to Get You Into My Life, and with Georgie Fame's Blue Flames, as well as the famed trombonists Rico and Boney M. Now, in the 1980s, he played with Aswad, and on his solo album, Tantan, Musical Nostalgia for Today, this was backed by the Cimarroons. In Brixton, he played at the famed Mambo Inn at the Loughborough Hotel and Mambista at West Norwood's Portico, and with Jamaica Jazz, who still perform at the Ephra Hall Tavern. He has a long musical history. He was educated at Alpha Boys School, an orphanage in Kingston, Jamaica, founded in 1880s. And he was famous for the many successful musicians who were part of its music program and the Alpha Boys band. We remember. The next libation is one that we try to touch on every single year. And I mentioned it earlier in one of the first libations I just passed. This is the New Cross Massacre. I was talking about Dr. Gray and the work he did, Gray Burke, and the work he did giving support to the parents of the young people who lost their lives in this massacre. Well, these are the young people themselves. And just for those of you who don't know, in the early hours of Sunday, the 18th of January, 1981, a devastating fire raged through a birthday party being held at a family home in New Cross Road, Deptford. This is southeast London. Now, 13 young people aged between 14 and 22 were killed. 27 more were seriously injured, and all were from the African Caribbean community. Now, 14th victim, Anthony Burbeck, who you can see in the image, he survived the fire, but he was tormented by the memory of what he had seen. And 2 years later, he died by suicide. Now, local history at the time, and even to this day now, appears to support the theory that the fire was a racist attack. I'm not going to go into the whole backstory about how the Queen didn't visit the family here, but she did. I'm talking about the British monarch did go and visit another family. I can't remember if it was in Ireland or Scotland, who had a similar like disaster, atrocity, attack, whichever you want to call it, fire, afflicting other people who were not of African heritage. But 10 years before, in 1971, a Caribbean house party had been attacked by a firebomb in Sunderland Road in nearby Forest Hill, and this left 22 injured. So this is kind of part of the reasons why there's this idea that this wasn't just an accident, as the authorities tried to make out, but this was a targeted attack, because even 3 years before then, in 1978, Deptford Albany Empire's community theatre was burnt down, with the National Front actually claiming responsibility. Now, at that time in 1981, and the New Cross Massacre, the community mobilized, and the Race Today collective, including Layla Hassan and Darcus Howe, who became her husband, and John LaRose, representing the Black Parents Movement, organized a community meeting at the local Moonshot Club. Now, the weekly meetings were held and the momentum built up for National Black People's Day of Action. And this was a march from New Cross into central London to disrupt the working day. Now, this march in itself is almost as legendary as the injustice that faced the family trying to seek answers to why so many young people lost their life. Because almost 20,000 people, almost exclusively African, marched across London. And in the 45 years plus since this tragedy, no one has been arrested or faced justice for the murders of these young people. I'm going to we call their names as we remember them. Andrew Gooding was age 14. Rosalind Henry, age 16. Patrick Cummings, age 16. Patricia Johnson, aged 15. Owen Thompson, age 16. Lloyd Hall, age 20. Humphrey Brown, aged 18. Steve Collins, age 17. Jerry Francis, age 17. Peter Campbell, aged 18. Now, Glenton Powell, age 16, passed away in hospital, as did Yvonne Ruddock, age 16, who passed away in hospital. Paul Ruddock, age 22, passed away in hospital. And Anthony Birkbeck, as I mentioned earlier, age 20, suicide. I think Sister Oleander actually knew the family, one of the members there. I think she was supposed to go there. I think it was Yvonne Ruddock. I'm not 100% sure. But I remember her telling me, because whenever this anniversary comes around, it's always triggering. And for those of you who are familiar with the Windrush tragedy, the massacre that took place there, and no justice, that's not the first time that the authorities have failed people who are minoritized. We remember. This next libation is to Colin Roach. Now, he joined the ancestors on the 12th of January 1983. He passed away inside Stonington police station from a gunshot wound. And if it sounds confusing, how did he pass away inside the station from a gunshot wound? Well, it's because the police would argue that he took the gun while inside the station and shot himself. Now, again, this is a libation, so I'm not going to go through all the details, but his friends and family made it very clear that Colin was not suicidal, but the police would continue maintaining that the wound was self-inflicted, and an inquest later that year would return a verdict of suicide. Now, Colin's death and subsequent inquest verdict sparked widespread anger and protest throughout the 1980s and beyond. The African community in Hackney had regularly faced police brutality, wrongful detention, and harassment. And many of you will be aware that Stoke Newington police station was notorious for corruption. Now, campaigners questioned the circumstances surrounding Colin's death with little evidence that he had taken a gun into the station. There were also discrepancies in the police accounts of what happened, with the barrister, I think his name's Anthony Gifford. They now use the title Lord Gifford. You know, I don't use these titles, but Anthony Gifford stated at the time that police statements were tainted by lies and conflicted evidence. Now, because they didn't get justice from the system, following Colin's death, the Roach Family Support Committee set up an independent committee of inquiry, which published the document Policing in Hackney 1945 to 1984, and this document contradicted police accounts of the way he died. It's a superb piece of work. It's kind of what I believe that we should always do when we don't get justice, that we do the investigation inquiry. You can buy this book; it's still available in place, and it's you know, it's a real benchmark of community organisation. But it doesn't bring back our brother Colin Roach, who we remember. The next libation is to Patrice Lumumba. Now, Patrice Lumumba was the first legally elected Prime Minister of the newly independent Democratic Republic of Congo. He only held that post between June and September 1960 before he was forced out of office during a political crisis and assassinated in January 1961. Now, Patrice Lumumba's determination to achieve genuine independence and to have full control over Congo's resources, to utilize them to improve the living conditions of our people, was perceived as a threat to Western interests. To fight him, the US and Belgium used all of the tools and resources at their disposal, included the United Nations Secretariat under someone called Dag Hammarskjöld and Ralph Bunche, to buy the support of Lumumba's Congolese rivals and hired killers. So he was assassinated because he wanted to liberate his homeland, to free African people. In Congo, Lumumba's assassination is rightly viewed as the country's original sin. And for those of you who've been watching AFRICOM, I haven't this year. I think the final's on. I don't know if it's today. It's Senegal versus, I think Morocco, I can't remember. No, Algeria. If you've been watching AFRICOM, you would have seen that there was a brother who was dressed up as Lumumba. And during the matches, he was standing there with a pose to honor Lumumba. Now, anyway, coming less than 7 months after independence, his murder was a stumbling block to the ideals of national unity, economic independence, and Pan-African solidarity. Yeah, we remember. I think I've somehow turned on this what do you call it? CC. This wait, captioning, closed captioning. I don't know how to turn it off. My hands hit the keyboard. Okay, it looks like this week you're going to have closed captioning on the program. I'm so sorry. I don't even know how I turned it on, and I certainly don't know how to turn it off. Oh, hold on. It might be this button. Let me try that one. Ah, there we go. Okay, thank you. And the next libation is to the scholar warrior and historian of the UNIA, that's the United Negro Improvement Association, the one and only Professor Tony Martin, who joined the ancestors on the 17th of January, 2013. Now, for those of you who don't know, Professor Tony Martin was an emeritus professor of Africana Studies at Wellesley College for 34 years between 1973 to 2007. Well, he was the founding member of the Africana Studies Department. He was a lecturer and prolific author of scholarly articles about African history, primarily for the Pan-African nationalist leader, Marcus Garvey. His written works and statements, even to this day, have generated intense debate and discussion. Now, some of you will recall, those of you who have followed Legally for a long time, that Professor Martin also triumphed in a particular attack upon his reputation by Zionists determined to silence him, speaking on the role of the Jewish elite in the Atlantic enslavement and genocide of African people. And this was quite a big case. He was disinvited from City Hall. I think it was I think Lee Jasper was in charge, was there, and Ken Livingston was there. They had an event. He was invited, and then because of his work, he was disinvited, and they kind of curtailed to kind of like political pressure. But he continued either way. Professor Martin had documented this particular history in a book called The Jewish Onslaught, which was published by Majority Press, his own Garveyite self-help publishing house, in 1993. And I think it was Al Kabelan who had led the organization of an event in South London, which I was able to attend. It was an amazing event. People conflate Zionism with anti-Semitism, which is something they shouldn't do. But it was an amazing event. I'm glad I was able to attend. It was a full house. I mean, people, there was no space to move. It was literally rammed up. People came from all over the country to listen to Tony Martin speak. He was a committed Pan-Africanist. He was peerless in the level of rigor when it came to writing about these topics. And we remember. The last libation for this section is a remembrance for Roger Sylvester. Now, on the 11th of January 1999, Roger was violently restrained by 8 Metropolitan Police officers outside his home. Now, despite needing urgent medical attention, the police sectioned him, taking him to St. Anne's Mental Health Hospital. Now, after continuing to restrain him, he suffered cardiac arrest and he was taken to intensive care, and 8 days later, on the 19th of January, he was pronounced dead. Now, Roger's family had grave concerns about the initial investigation into his death, which was led by the Metropolitan Police itself. It took almost 5 years for an inquest to be held. The inquest found that the police involved were aware of the potential risk of prolonged restraint and evidence of false record keeping. The jury unanimously concluded that Roger was unlawfully killed. Yet, despite sufficient evidence, just over a year later, this verdict was overturned on a technicality. After Roger's death, the family started the momentous and enduring family-led Roger Sylvester Justice Campaign to fight for truth and justice for Roger. And you can still see the legacy of that work in the United Friends and Family Campaign, who continue to annually raise these particular issues. And of course, Inquest, which is, you can go to their website, which documents and details a lot of these cases where people of African heritage have been killed in police custody, sometimes just simply because they have a mental health crisis, they're in distress, and the police decide to use overwhelming force. And they call it positional asphyxia. This is where they restrain people using force. You saw this with George Floyd when they had the knee on his throat, but this is on his neck. Positional asphyxia is anything that blocks the airway and causes people in distress to die. We remember. And that's the last libation for this week. Let me take a sip of water. You're watching the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. As usual, if you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. I keep saying Twitter, but I think we're going to stop Twitter, or what they call X now, because it's such a toxic platform. I don't see any benefit in doing anything that can actually help prop it up. So it probably just be, I'm not saying that there's not problems with YouTube, which is Google, and Facebook, which is Meta, but Twitter is clearly a right-wing platform. It's clearly far right. The Muskie one is a white supremacist. There's no shadow of a doubt. And I don't want anything we do. We had to keep an eye on it, but I don't really want to do anything with it that helps it. Anyway, this next section looks at general domestic news affecting our community from over the past few weeks. And I'm going to start off with, I suppose this is some good news. It says David Norris here, but it says Stephen Norris on my notes. So I'm not sure if it's David or Stephen because both of them were involved. So Stephen Norris, I've got in my notes, one of Stephen Lawrence's murderers has been denied parole. He had sought release during a parole hearing in October, having been jailed in 2012 over the murder of Stephen Lawrence. Stephen, who was 18 at the time, was stabbed to death in a racist attack in South London in 1993. Police failings in the investigation into his killing made the case notorious and ultimately led to the Metropolitan Police being branded institutionally racist by public inquiry, and rightly so. Now, only two of his killers, including Norris, have been convicted. Police have always maintained that 6 people were involved. And Stephen's mother, Doreen Lawrence, said that Norris remains a dangerous racist who should never be let out of prison. Now, his parole came, or his bid for his parole came 13 years after he was jailed for life with a minimum sentence of 14 years and 3 months. Yeah, I don't want to say much more than that. But the case is quite famous. We know it gained national attention as the Met failed to properly investigate the 5 prime suspects, with only 2, Norris and Gary Dobson, finally being convicted. The other suspects remain free. The next story is one about this community centre, which has actually been credited with helping to stop race riots in northwest London in the 1980s, which is facing demolition after a bid for it to be granted heritage protection was rejected. Now, the Harsden's People Community Council launched a public campaign last year for Bridge Park Community Centre in Harsden to be recognised as a national heritage site. And this was a tactic to try and preserve it. But unfortunately, Historic England, a public body responsible for preserving and celebrating England's historic environment, has decided to not add the centre to the national list of protected buildings. Last year, Brent Council said it was looking to redevelop Hillside Corridor, which the community centre is a part of, as part of a £600 million investment. But the site has resonance for campaigners who say destroying it would eradicate the history of African people in Britain. So, yeah, Unfortunately, Historic England has not decided to list Bridge Park, and many people are saying that this ignores the historic and symbolic importance, privileging architectural merit over the rich story embedded in the building's actual fabric. A sad story. Another one is, I hate doing these stories, I'm sorry. A woman accused of murdering her daughter in a house fire has appeared before a judge. Lesma Rose Whitbier, age 4, our princess that you can see in the image, passed away from her injuries in hospital following the blaze at a property in Rusholme, March last year. Now, her mother, 45-year-old Karen Wilbur, has been charged with murder and arson with intent to endanger life. She appeared at Manchester's Magistrates Court before her case was transferred to Manchester Crown Court, where she appeared on the 8th of January. Now, paying tribute after her passing, our young princess's family said, Lesma Rose was the star of the family. Anyone who knew her knew she was the most beautiful child inside and out. She always had a smile on her face and could put the smile or the same on others. She was such a smart and intelligent girl in her own unique ways, and she will be deeply missed by anyone who was blessed to meet her. Yeah, of course, we'll keep you updated as we hear more on that trial. Another tragic story, similar ilk. A former Hyde Park gardener who bludgeoned his own brother to death after draining his bank account and leaving him to live in squalor has been jailed for life. Now, Peter John, 60, the man pictured on our screen, attacked retired postman Miller Paul John, who's 61, his own brother. Admittedly, he was drunk, but he attacked him with a garden fork, a chair leg, and his own walking stick as he lay in his bed at the home they shared in Homerton, East London, which is obviously, well, it's where we are now. The Inner London Crown Court heard Miller John described by family as a softly spoken, magnificent man who had taken his brother in when he was homeless. He struggled with his health, the victim, after brain surgery, which he'd had 5 years earlier, and he was bedridden in the final week of his life. Now, John, the murderer, claimed to be caring for his brother, but the court heard he withdrew £1,500 from his bank account in the week before killing him and spent the money on a daily drinking sessions, which left his sick brother at home in a dirty flat with little food. John took himself out for breakfast the morning after the murder on March the 3rd, before then handing himself into the police and admitted, "I've bludgeoned my brother last night in a fit of rage." Now, he did plead guilty to murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum terms of 15 years. This doesn't bring him back, obviously, his brother. But, yeah. The next story is about a report or some research which shows that over half of UK workers are calling on the government to introduce a mandatory ethnicity pay gap reporting within the next 12 months. Now, this is actually released or was released to coincide with Ethnicity Pay Gap Day, which takes place on the 8th of January. We obviously wasn't on air at that time. But a study commissioned by Workplace Equality Champion People Like Us revealed that 56% of workers from minority ethnic backgrounds have been paid less for similar work than colleagues from a different ethnic background. Of this group, 14% challenged their unequal pay and received a raise, while 13% faced repercussions after highlighting the issue. And that's really worrying, because it means that, you've got 15% chance of being successful if you say something about it, but you could also lose your job. So it doesn't actually encourage people to stand up. Now, in general, some 35% of more than 2,000 UK working adults responding to the survey have been paid less than colleagues with similar roles and responsibilities. And the survey workers with minority ethnic backgrounds said that they're twice as likely as European workers who were surveyed to say they are more likely to seek a job at firms that voluntarily report their ethnicity pay gaps. Now, this is quite clear. If a company is behaving ethically and it upfront shows that it has an ethnicity pay gap and it's working to eradicate it, then you're more likely to see people from minority ethnic backgrounds choose that employer than one that has that gap, pretends it doesn't exist, and is likely to punish you if you make a comment that a colleague who's doing even less work than you or the same work as you is getting more money because they're of a different ethnic background. This is, again, another form of systemic racism. The next story, we talk about systemic racism, and I've got to be careful with this one because I don't know all the facts here apart from what's been shared in media campaigns. The sickle cell day unit at the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel is now facing closure due to a temporary 6-month trial. And I should say following a temporary 6-month trial. Now, this unit, which is invaluable, and I know it's invaluable because, like I said, the Royal London is the other hospital that we use as a family and as a peer support group. It's literally just down the road from us. If we can't get to Armstrong Hospital, we use the one at Royal London. Provides critical care and support to individuals suffering from sickle cell, which, for those of you who don't know, is a genetic blood disorder that predominantly affects people of African heritage, not exclusively, but predominantly. There's something called thalassemia for people with what they call Mediterranean backgrounds, which is in the same family. Now, closing this facility would have a devastating impact on the hundreds of families who rely on the specialized services. And what many people don't realize is that sickle cell is a serious concern, affecting over 15,000 people in the UK. It causes chronic pain, infections, and even organ damage. It requires regular and immediate medical attention, which the Sickle Cell Day Unit has tirelessly provided. Now, the team at the unit is equipped with specialized knowledge and compassion to address the unique challenges faced by patients, offering treatments that greatly improve the quality of life. Now, I know that this is I saw a campaign on this. I haven't had a chance to add my name to it. It might be change.org. That's trying to campaign to get this overturned. I started the libations with reference to one of our members, Ugo, who joined the ancestors, and it looks like it might be that he was denied care because of lack of compassion. But we need to find out more. I also started this program explaining that my wife Oleander's not doing well. She's suffering from this virus which has affected her throat, and she's been like that for 2 weeks. You'll probably hear me wheezing, so I think I also am suffering from something. I'm hoping it doesn't get worse. And just so you know as well, I mean, this is probably too much information. My daughter just came down and explained that my son is had a crisis. So we need as many resources as possible to help people of African heritage who have specific ailments. Just because we are not the ethnic majority doesn't mean that spaces like this, which might not be cost effective. I don't know yet why it's being closed down. That might not be cost effective for whatever reason the excuse that they give. Doesn't mean that that's a good enough reason to withdraw those services. We are also citizens in the space. We also contribute through our tax to the service provisions. But I'm going to leave that there. The final story, which is probably linked to the preceding story, is this one where we've been told that foreign doctors and nurses are increasingly shunning the NHS because anti-migrant rhetoric and rising racism have created a hostile environment. Now, around the world, people are now getting this idea, which I'm pretty sure the far right did it once, that the UK is an unwelcoming, racist country. And this is in part because of the government's approach to immigration. So overseas health professionals, which this country desperately needs, are not only not coming, but those who are there are quitting the NHS, especially post-Brexit. And at the same time, the number of nurses and midwives joining the NHS has fallen sharply over the past year. So this is an ongoing problem. There's what's her name? Dickinson. Let me see, Jeanette Dickinson, who I think also works, or I don't know if she did the research on this, has said that without the contribution of foreign doctors and nurses, the NHS could easily fall over and find itself without a critical mass of people to run the service safely. So I'm going to leave that there. Dickinson is an NHS consultant and clinical oncologist. And that's the last one for that section. Just as an update, you are watching the Galleys Pan-African Community News Update. Again, as usual, if you're watching live, you're welcome to interact. You can chat to us through Facebook, YouTube. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. Sister Oleander, unfortunately, is not with us this week, so the chat is actually live, so you can still make comments. It's difficult for me to see what's there, but it's on a completely different screen. Is it possible to add a libation for Elder Parkofi of Wolverhampton? Oh, no, thank you. I didn't know that. I didn't see that in time. And yes, so please share interactions. And yeah, we are just want to make a libation for Elder Parkofi of Wolverhampton. And we remember. And I'm going to move on to the next slide. And again, this is your platform. This is your program. So use it, be respectful, be informative, be positive. Okay, so let's look at the politics or politricks that have been taking place. Now, this is, many of you know, Shamima Begum, and the Home Secretary has robustly defended the decision to strip her of her British citizenship as European judges are scrutinising that move. Now, what I mean by this is that the European Court of Human Rights have called for an investigation, but a government source said the decision had been already upheld by UK courts and they have no intention of changing it. For those of you who don't remember or know the details of this, Mrs. Bacon was 15 years of age when she travelled from East London to the Middle East to a territory held by the Islamic State group where she married a fighter. Now, 26 years of age, she was subsequently stripped of her British citizenship on the ground that she posed a threat to national security. But her lawyers said that this has failed to consider whether she was a victim of grooming and trafficking, which clearly, seeing that she was 15 when she went and married, she was. Now, the European Court of Human Rights has asked the Home Office whether ministers at home considered whether Miss Begum was being a victim and whether the UK had obligations to her. But a government source said the Home Secretary will robustly defend the decision to revoke Shamima Begum's citizenship, which has been tested and upheld time and time again in our domestic courts. This country's Home Secretary is a disgrace. I'm not even going to go through some of the things that she's said and done recently, just as we have a Justice Minister who's trying to scrap jury trials. But, this is a situation where we need to keep an eye on, because the moment we know that the British government is willing to revoke citizenship from children who are being groomed, then we have to be understanding, just like, what we're seeing in America with the ICE, taking people off the streets, shooting women in the face. We are not safe. I'm going to come back to this story. I don't want to spend too much time on this one. We now have a tally of 34 school contemporaries of Nigel Farage who have come forward to claim that they've seen him behave in a racist or anti-Semitic manner. I really don't like separating the two. Anti-Semitism is racism, and we shouldn't separate the two because it privileges one over the other. But one of these new allegations is from Jason Meredith, who describes his heritage as Anglo-Indian. And he was 3 years below Farage at Dulwich College, which is a primary school in southeast London. And he claims that Farage called him the P word and would use taunts such as "go back home." Now, he's just one of several contemporaries of Farage to have told the media that they were targeted by Farage for abuse. And he has come under sustained pressure from politicians belonging to various parties to own up and apologise, but he's refused to do so. I'm not going to go on much about this. We know that he's been Afrophobic, telling one schoolmate to go back to Africa. He made gas hissing noises at Jewish pupils. Is a very nasty individual. This is the leader of the Reform Party. Talking about very nasty, we have Robert Jenrick, and for those of you who don't know, he up to a few days ago was a minister in the nasty Tory party, as they like to call them, the nasty party, the Tory party. He was planning to defect and cause as much damage to the Tory party when he did so. His plans were leaked to Kerry Badenoch, who's the leader, and she fired him, forcing him to defect straight away. Now, so he's no longer inside the Tory cabinet and has been, branded a liar by his own colleagues in the Tory party. Ms. Badenoch has insisted his departure would bring stability to the party, but those close to her are concerned that Farage's call to action, saying that anyone considering the move from the Tories to Reform in time for the 7th of May local elections should do so, or they risk being ejected by the party. So this could actually trigger more departures. Of course, you and I don't really care what's happening to the Tory party as it implodes. We don't like to see the Reform Party getting major coverage, because these people who have been propped up by British taxpayers' money, let's be clear about that, are now got another platform to spew their hate. But yeah, this is what's taking place. I'm not going to spend much time talking about their internal politics. They're both as bad as each other, whether it's the Tory or Reform. They're both hard right, far right parties. And the last story, which again, unfortunately, is Reform, is just to remind you of the toxicity of the party. Its deputy leader, is a guy called Richard Tice, has been asked, are you going to condemn one of your male candidates who said that David Lammy should go home to the Caribbean? And Richard Tice said no. It was the role of the party to challenge the Justice Secretary, so they're not going to apologise. Now, this comment's been made by Chris Parry, who tweeted it on the platform X, which used to be Twitter. Again, one of the reasons why I don't really want to help support that or promote it in any way. He was what we call a retired naval rear admiral, and he's now standing for mayor in what they call Hampshire. He made lots of comments. Lammy should go home to the Caribbean where his loyalty lies, despite the fact that Lammy was born in North London to Guyanese parents. So yeah, this is where they stand, and it's one of those reminders that no matter what happens, what we do, no matter how long we're here for, even if we're born here, there are these politicians who will never accept that we are British nationals and that we have every right to be here. And this again is from the Reform Party. Oof, okay, you are watching Legali's Pan-African. You're watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. If you're with us live, you're welcome to interact with us from Facebook. Have a quick look. Okay, the chat is live. It's automatically just populating on the screen, so you can please send a message. It's a bit tricky for me to actually read the news and also monitor the chat. Sister Oleander will be back with us hopefully in the next couple of weeks when we have our next broadcast. But don't forget to like, tweet, like, share, subscribe, all those kind of things if you find this broadcast useful. But now I'm going to go into the next section where we review some of the policing stories around the UK for the past few weeks. And the first one is, I don't know what to say about this. Is it good news or bad news, or it's good news following bad news? I don't know how to say it. No, it's about accountability. There we go. It's not good news or bad news. It's about accountability. Now, the Metropolitan Police have been forced to apologise after footage showed an African father being detained forcibly by 5 officers in front of his 2 young children. Now, the incident, which took place in Stockwell on the 8th of January and was filmed by a member of the public, sparked widespread concern after video circulated online showing the officers restraining him. And again, this is the sort of thing, if you've heard about what's happened to Renee Good, where she was shot 3 times in the face by an ICE officer. These things happen all the time, but unless someone films it and shares that footage, often we don't know. But in this particular instance, according to a witness who spoke to Blackcurrant News, the stop followed an earlier police encounter involving the same vehicle just days before. The witness said that during the incident, 2 children aged 1 or around 1 and 4 years old were left unattended in the car, feeling distressed. Now, bystanders stepped in to raise concerns about their welfare because the older child kept crying that he wanted his dad and didn't want him to get hurt. Now, the statement issued after the matter, the police said, well, the Metropolitan Police said they apologized to the family and confirmed that they are reviewing 2 separate traffic stops involving the same vehicle carried out days apart in Westminster and Lambeth. So, yeah, this is really a story about police accountability, but of course, violence and a lack of any kind of duty of care to the children that are in the car, crying, worrying about their father being hurt. The next story is probably linked to some of the libations when we talked about the New Cross massacre, and we talk about also the release or the denial of release of the murder of Stephen Lawrence. Because as you all know, if you've been watching the program, there's been a undercover policing inquiry which is examining how officers spied on thousands of individuals and organizations between 1968 and at least 2010. Now, one such organization that was spied on is the Hackney Community Defence Association, which was an activist organization which was the subject of police monitoring for a decade. One officer who infiltrated the group had a relationship with a HCDA member, which was the Hackney Community Defence Association, for 5 years while he was married with children. And it's important to understand that the HCDA was set up in 1988 in response to police brutality and racism, enabling victims of police violence to obtain justice through the legal system. They took up the cases of people who had suffered injustice at the hands of the Met. They monitored police activity and offered paralegal support to campaigns who are likely to find themselves in confrontation with the police. Now, the inquiry heard officers compiled 44 surveillance reports dated between August 1988, which is a month after the HCDA was established, and 1998, which detailed group members, activities, and personal information. Now, one was the founder of HCDA, Graham Smith. The inquiry heard reports on him contained information about his marriage and his father's terminal cancer. Most of us are probably familiar, who have been following the story, about the undercover officer, Mark Jenner, who infiltrated the group in 1995. He went by the false name of Mark Gasty and had a 5-year relationship with activist Alison, that's not her real name, during his deployment. So this is just an ongoing about this inquiry. We're learning about how low the police were, where they were getting police officers to get into personal relationships, be intimate with community groups, and while they're spying on them. Thankfully, because legality started during this period, we don't have any record that we had an infiltrator in our organization. But you know, we know that the Lawrence campaign was spied on, and I suspect that many others that we still haven't come to light, you know, are deserving extra scrutiny. The next story is a complaint. Well, this is basically this is a claim from let me say her name, Kisra Bano, who said that there's widespread racism and homophobia within the West Midlands Police, and the force has failed to act over multiple serious allegations. Now, Kisra Bano was a former chief inspector. Apologies for this, my voice is going. She was a former chief inspector, and she says that the racist behaviour that's been taking place in West Midlands Police is on a huge scale, and it includes things like asking African colleagues to give a tribal dance, telling Asian colleagues after a terror attack, your mates have been at it again, all these kind of banter, these kind of comments. Now, she's taken the force's chief constable, Craig Guilford, to an employment tribunal, claiming that racist officers were on frontline duty every day. And of course, the force is denying this. They said it's made significant progress in rooting out improper behaviour, and it would defend itself against any unfair allegations of discrimination. Now, Miss Bano has retired this year after she said her mental health suffered because of what she had been through, And she also alleges that commanders took little action to condemn racism in the force because they did not want to annoy the European male officers. Now, again, she's saying that the racism of police officers is a threat to public safety, and it's a duty of police officers to mitigate against that threat. So the police are denying it. They're going to fight her action. They deny the fact that their lack of action was detrimental to her health, and they've asked her to prove injury or loss relating to her claim. So this is going to run for a little while. We can only wish her some success as she exposes the fact that what she claims there were racist officers on the frontline duty every day. I think this is just a given. So I saw something. Yeah, Banner. No, Kisra Banner. I don't know. The last story in this police section is one of police officer, Metropolitan police officer named PC Liam Newman. Now, Newman tasered a suspected burglar who fell from a wall and suffered injuries that made him a tetraplegic. But this happened in 2022, but since then he's been cleared of assault. Now it's difficult to know, this is like a news program. It's an update, but it's also kind of like a news program. So I don't like to add comment if I don't know all the facts. So what we do know is that Leonard Sandyford, who was 61 years of age, of African heritage, was running away from police in Woodford Green, East London, when he reached a cul-de-sac, climbed on an outbuilding, and fell after being tasered. He's like I said, he's now forced to use a wheelchair. Newman had pleaded not guilty to grievously bodily harm following an investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct, the IOPC. The Met said that Newman had been on restricted duty since the incident, with the criminal proceedings concluded. The force said it would liaise with the IOPC around misconduct proceedings. So there's something not quite right in this story. The court has cleared him, but the IOPC suggests is still investigating him. So I don't know what's missing in this story. But what we do know is that, unfortunately, he's been found not guilty. And I say unfortunately because if he is guilty, then of course that's clearing him of something that cannot be reversed, because Sandyford is now inside a wheelchair. He's 61 years of age. But I don't want to comment on this because I don't have all the facts. But I'm just sharing that story with you. Okay, the next section, as if we haven't been talking about this already when we talk about these other issues of policing and politics, is explicitly about white supremacy. And I use white supremacy to describe violent amphiphobia, racism that's taken place in the UK around around the nation over the past few weeks. You are watching the Galleys Pan-African Community News Update. And of course you can interact with us live. I'll keep looking over to see if there's any comments. But yeah, let me keep going on. So the first story we have is that of a hospital nurse who worked in Birmingham, who has been struck off by the Nursing and Midwifery Council, NMC. Now this has happened after she posted racist content on social media. Now, the nurse who you can see or the former nurse, I should say, who you can see in the image, her name is Roberta Batcher, was working as a ward manager for University Hospital Birmingham NHS Foundation Trust when she posted on Facebook in August 2024 a series of pictures, including a boat filled with people arriving at a beach, and captioned, "These give nothing and get everything." And she also had a picture that showed a homeless veteran with the caption, "These give everything and get nothing." And the V's here is very interesting, because this is where we start seeing this bit about not just racism, it's the humanization that goes with it. Now, the Nursing and Midwifery Council said that she also posted a picture of a child being chased by men, one wielding a knife, captioned, "Next time when you pay your taxes, remember some of your money goes for the protection of mosques." And she also posted a split image showing a security inspection captioned, "You at the airport," and a man departing from a boat captioned, "Mohammed at Dover." So you can see here there's a clear trend towards Islamophobia, straight out racism and bigotry. Now, thankfully, when the trust was alerted to her racist views in August 2024, they acted on the complaint, which came from a member of the public. The NMC panel considered the order to strike her off as necessary to protect the public and to mark the seriousness of Miss Batchelor's misconduct and underpin the importance of maintaining public confidence in the profession, and to send the public and the profession a clear message about the standard of behaviour required of a registered nurse. I said Miss Batchelor, it's Mrs. Batchelor. So again, she had won this Pride of Nursing award, but clearly this is not the image of nursing that anyone would like to be promoted around the world, and she's now been struck off. I wish I could say that was the only sector where this is happening, but we have this one Patrick Lawler. Now, he was a teacher who described Islam as satanic and told pupils that cocaine was purer back in the day. And thankfully, he's now been banned from the profession. Now, a teaching regulation agency held an external hearing in December, and they found him guilty of professional misconduct and bringing the teaching profession into disrepute. Now, Lawler had previously featured in an undercover BBC Wales investigation into extreme far-right views among a group's members in Wales and England, in which he said race war was inevitable. His views appeared in BBC Wales' documentary Unmasked, Extreme Far Right, in which the undercover reporter infiltrated a far-right group called Patriotic Alternative and met members in parts of South Wales and in England. And in that, he told the reporter that all foreigners had no right to be in the UK, and said if any refused to leave, the only way to get rid of them will be to kill every single one of them. And we have to have the hearts of steel to do that. Now, he's been banned from teaching indefinitely, although he can apply to be reinstated after the 22nd of December 2029. I'm hoping if any of you are still following these kind of stories and Legality is still doing its thing in 2029, if he does apply, we're there to object to his application being approved. This comment that all foreigners had no right to be in the UK, and if they refuse, the only way to get rid of them would be to kill every single one of them, is incitement for hatred. And the fact that he was a teacher, I thought nursing was scary. This is shaping the minds of another generation. This is also scary. And then, if you thought that two sectors, this was bad enough, let me add a third sector. And this is the case of Miss Dunsmore. And I say Miss Dunsmore, William Dunsmore, not Miss. He was a sterling care worker who had to be removed from the register after regulators found out that he'd used racist language while supporting a vulnerable person and then failed to challenge them on similar remarks. Now, this was a decision published by the Scottish Social Services Council after a series of incidents that occurred during a shift in May 2025. Now, what happened was that William Dunsmore, Mr. William Dunsmore, found that he had used racist terms whilst out with a supported person who in the report is referred to as AA, which included comments about ethnic minorities and derogatory language related to people of African heritage. He was also found to have told AA or asked AA what he would do if they tried to send, and he uses the P word, to you. And this prompted AA, remember this is a vulnerable person who's been assisted, to reply using further racist language and threats of violence, which were not challenged by Mr. Dunsmore. So he's inciting, he's encouraging, he's influencing a vulnerable person to engage in violent racist practice. They said that his behavior was racially motivated and risked encouraging racist attitudes in the supported person. Now, according to the SSSC, the conduct represented a serious breach of the standards expected of social service workers, including the requirement to treat people with dignity and respect, promote diversity, and avoid discriminatory behavior. The report stated that Mr. Dunsmore's actions fell well below the standards expected and were fundamentally incompatible with professional practice. Okay, and you want some more? You want another sector in the UK over the last 3 weeks? There we go. This one's sports. Now, Newcastle United have contacted the police after midfielder Joe Wilcock was the subject of disgusting racial abuse and deeply disturbing threats on social media. So perhaps in this case, it's good that the sector reported the offence and not perpetuating it. You see, Wilcock was targeted by an anonymous Instagram account following his side's 2-0 win against Crystal Palace on the 4th of January. Now, the substitute missed a chance to score late at St James Park and went on to post a screen grab highlighting a series of abhorrent private messages he received from a social media user after the game. Now, Joe Wilcock, who works for the club, said, oh, hold on, no, that's not right. Let me get it before I mix up the names. The club said, we are disgusted by the racist abuse received by Joe Wilcock on Instagram on Sunday evening. So Joe Wilcock is the person who sent the abuse. No, oh God, you can tell I'm not a football person. Joe Wilcock is the footballer in the image, and we don't have the name of the person who sent the abuse. So this is the story. Apologies for mangling that. I'm just not a football person, as you probably can tell. But anyway, basically it's been reported to the police. It's the second time in less than a year that our brother Wilcock has highlighted the racist messages that he's received on Instagram. Sorry, Joe, that you have to go through this just while you're doing your job. But well done to the team for standing up and moving forward on this. Let's hope we can find out more about the consequences that are faced by those, or the person who sent those private. They did it private on purpose so that they can hide. But we'll see what happens on that. Oh, okay. Where are we? Okay, so there's been research which probably won't surprise you, and it's found out that a number of people who believe Britishness is something you're born with has almost doubled in 2 years, and it's led to a rising tide of ethno-nationalism in Britain. Now, this is according to research that's been taken by the Institute of Public Policy Research, IPPR, and it says that around 1/3 of people for a person who must be born British to be truly British, and that's gone up from 1 in 5 in 2023. So it's increasing. What does that mean? If you think about, we spoke about Shemana Begum and her Britishness, her citizenship's been revoked. What we're hearing is that supporters of Nigel Farage's Reform Party held the most extreme views of the party backers, saying, with 71% saying that having something called British ancestry was a prerequisite for someone to be truly British. And 59% saying they believe that the nation was an ethnic, not a civic community. And this is really important because it's arguing that even if you're born here, even if you're not even first, second, third generation, it makes no difference. They're arguing that there's this ethnic quota, this ancestry of what it means to be British. This is just another way of racism, kind of like finding a way to hide this ethno-nationalism. It's not a surprise that it's that the Reform Party supporters, it's over 71%. But what is worrying is that over 1/3% of people taking part in that in that survey, it's 36%, also believe that. What again shouldn't be a surprise to you is that more than 1/3 of Reform UK voters said that they would be proud of Britain if there were few people from minority ethnic backgrounds in a decade's time. And 10% just went straight out and said it was important to have white skin to be a good British citizen. That's the words. They didn't even hide it. So the results are evidence that hard right narratives are having some success in remolding the public's perceptions of national identity. Overall, though, popular opinion still supports a progressive vision of Britishness based on shared values, not ethnicity or ancestry. So we have to keep our eye on this because this is ongoing, and it's a redefinition of what it means to be British. The same way there's a redefinition of what it means to be American, and wherever we are, these national identities are being conflated with ethnic identities, which are then conflated with race. And we see ethno-nationalism, which is always erupts in some level of violence. My voice. Okay, last story for this section. The last sector we're going to talk about, this is politics. We'll go back to that again. And I don't know if it's a funny story. I don't know what to say about this story. It's just an interesting one because, we have a Conservative councillor who's been suspended from the party over her membership to a dating site aimed at white supremacists. Now, you can see her in the image. Lilith Osborne has represented Glastonbury Town Council in Somerset since 2022. And she was even named by the Observer as one of the 450 UK residents who had profile on White Date, the so-called, whites-only dating website, which was recently shut down by a hacker. So this claim to fame has really kind of like got the party worried. And so the Conservative Party has said that they've suspended her pending investigation, that they have robust procedures in place to handle complaints, and this process is rightfully confidential. What that normally indicates is that she will be investigated, she'll be suspended while people are kind of watching the story. And the moment that it dies down, the furore around it, she'll be reinstated. This is the normal approach of far-right politics. I regard the Conservative Party as a far-right party in the UK. But it's an interesting story, and it's something you should be aware of. So they have their own ecosystem that even emerges in dating apps. Okay, that's the last story for that section. You are watching Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. If you're watching live, blah, 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 welcome to interact. What is it? Hit the what's it called? The like button, the subscribe button, the share button, all those kind of things. Let people know, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, this next section looks at some of the world news related to our community over the past few weeks. And there's been a lot of it. I don't know about you. I was very depressed when I heard some of the stories that came over the airways over the last last month as we went into the new year. It set the year off in a very negative tone. This blatant, overt, naked imperialism. It was a very horrible feeling. But let me get started on this one. So I'm not going to talk about Bondi Beach. I'm not going to talk about the fire inside Switzerland, all these kind of things. I'm going to start straight here in Venezuela. And this is not to say that those things aren't bad, especially what's going on in Iran as well. But this particular story is talking about the impact of Trump's administration's airstrikes and capture. We say media saying capture, we say kidnap of Nicolas Maduro and his wife are already being felt well beyond Venezuela's borders. And for those of you who don't know, the US government decided to seize a sovereign head of state and his wife in their pajamas out of their home. It was an audacious colonial act, and he's now been extradited to America. He's in New York, standing trial for trumped-up charges because the American administration wants Venezuela's resources. Now, President Gustavo Petro in neighboring Colombia announced that their security forces were being deployed along the border to prepare for a possible refugee influx. And Colombia hosts the largest Venezuelan diaspora already. I'm always a bit sad when these kind of thing happens because, of course, those are your neighbors and they're your family in many ways, and you shouldn't really be putting more boundaries. But I understand people try to protect the resources. He also confirmed that there were multiple strikes in Caracas, including a military airbase, other installations, and legislative building, which he then used to condemn the attacks as an aggression against Venezuela and Latin America, urging the US to engage in de-escalation. Now, we didn't hear about the attacks in Caracas. We only hear what the Western media decides to focus on, but it wasn't just Venezuela. The Colombian president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, labeled the US action state terrorism, which is the correct term, and called for urgent international intervention, which is clearly not going to happen unless you want intervention that's going to empower the United States, empower Israel, empower NATO. It's not going to happen. They're more focused on Greenland at this particular moment in time. Now, Cuba, which is always been framed as America's long-term foe outside Russia, is now facing its most severe economic crisis since the fall of the Soviet Union. And it's important to know that it relies heavily on Venezuelan oil. So any disruption could actually worsen an already dire situation. And the government in Havana, which has been in power since 1959, has been closely watching the unfolding situation closely. Now, some of you are thinking, this is all very fascinating, Toyin, very interesting. What's that got to do with us, as African people? And of course, you shouldn't be thinking like that, because wherever there's humans on this planet, African people have traveled there somewhere. Well, the first thing to know is that the Caribbean community leaders recently met in an emergency session following the US bombing of Venezuela and the kidnapping of Maduro and his wife. And they've said that they come under the name of CARICOM. They say that they're actively monitoring the situation, which is of grave concern to the region, with possible implications for neighboring countries. So they're quite worried. More so, who's also worried, is the Prime Minister, or the Trinidadian Prime Minister, Kamala Bissessar. I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name, Bissessar. Now, she was quick to tell the world that her federation with Tobago, which has been a strong supporter of the Trump's administration's military and other activities in the Caribbean, had nothing to do with the latest developments. And that's a really important point to note, because Trinidad and Tobago have supported the Trump's outrageous military demands, kind of like going against the rest of the Caribbean and placing us at risk. Now, when I say that, it's because this is not even conspiracy. This is a fact that Trinidad and Tobago previously allowed the US military radar and exercises in Tobago, which drew criticism from opposition parties. The US had also requested that Grenada consider a similar request. So CARICOM is right to keep an eye on this, because they're going to be drawn, if they're not careful, into a conflict, into an imperial conflict against Latin America, and if they're drawn into it on the wrong side, this will have consequences for all of us. I say that, and I don't have the details in front of me, but I don't. It's not even on the news. It's not even on our program today. But if I can remember correctly, the American administration had put visa bans now on 75 nations. 75 nations now. So so I can't remember them all. I remember Nigeria's inside there. I think Barbados is one of them. 75 nations are now forbidden. You can't travel to America. So this is an escalating situation. There's no big noise about all this stuff. So you need to go online and do this research. But for those of us with families and links outside of Europe, or who might want to go on holiday, or these impact us all. Oh, okay. This was a horrible story that came up a few weeks ago. There was this euphoria over this boxing double whammy with kind of like these white supremacist toxic masculinity kind of like opponents being defeated, and one of them by the British heavyweight boxer Anthony Joshua. But then shortly after that, when he traveled to Nigeria, we heard the horrific news that he'd been injured in a car crash, which killed 2 members of his team. Now, just to give you the backdrop, he was a passenger in a Lexus SUV, and it collided with a stationary truck on a major expressway in Ogun State near Lagos. The 2 men who passed away were Joshua's close friend and team members Sine Gami and Latiz Ayodele. You can see them in the image above. Joshua's promoter said that he was in a stable condition himself. He was in hospital. I think he's probably out now, but he was there where he was taken for checks and treatment, and observation. Now, trying to find out exactly what happened, we've got a statement from the police commander of Nigeria's Traffic Compliance and Enforcement Corps, and they've said that their early investigations show that the Lexus has been traveling along the highway from Lagos to Sagamu, where it experienced a tire burst due to excessive speed, and then the driver just lost control. So Edeni Kayode, who's Joshua's driver, has been charged at a magistrate's court for causing death by dangerous driving. It's a horrible horrible, tragic case. So from celebration to horrible. I mean, it's just horrible. And you know, of course, while we're thankful that Anthony is still with us, you know, we really feel for the loss of his friends and teammates. We talk about tragedy that's taking place, and again in Nigeria. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, she had 21. She basically had 21-month-old son has passed away, and this has ignited a massive debate about patient safety within Nigeria's healthcare system. The health minister has admitted that there are systemic challenges and has announced the creation of a national task force on clinical governance and patient safety to improve the quality of care. But she says that her young son, Nakonu Lamadi, died last week at a private hospital in the main city, Lagos, following a short illness. It's alleged that the child was denied oxygen and excessively sedated, leading to cardiac arrest. Now, of course, the hospital has extended its deepest sympathies, but in a statement, it's denied all wrongdoing, stating its treatment met international standards. Now, of course, I don't know. None of us know the ins and outs. We'll have to wait to see what happens with an investigation. But this was obviously something that should never have ever happened. And you know, and I spoke earlier about Ugo's the refusal to give Ugo, our colleague, medical care, and you know, we also heard about the shutting down of the sickle cell day unit in the Royal London, which, you know, was really a hub of excellence of people, of clinicians who understood sickle cell, and so I can help prevent these kind of things happening. I don't know what's happened in this particular case other than that the allegation that he was denied oxygen and was excessively sedated, which of course could cause renal failure leading to cardiac arrest. But we'll keep an eye out on this story. It's tragic, and our thoughts are with our sister. It's a horrible, horrible case. I don't know what's happening with AFRICOM, but I do know that Algeria's parliament has unanimously passed a law declaring France's colonization of the region a crime and demanding an apology and reparations. And this is excellent. This is following in the kind of like stance of nations like Barbados. Now, the law also criminalizes the glorification of colonialism. And again, there's another superb approach, because we often hear, we know about it's a crime to do Holocaust denial in many European nations, but people continuously can deny the atrocities of colonization, of African enslavement. I think that should have been added to this personally. But this is a start, and it's also a sign that we take these things seriously. They haven't been addressed. We often know in the UK about Anglophone imperialism. We know about, you know, what they did in nations where the British colonized, were the colonizers, where the British were the enslavers. But Francophone imperialism was just as ruthless. You know, it was just as horrific. You know, I'm not going to go back to German. I'm not going to go back to Portuguese. In this particular case, it's right that this law has been passed by their parliament, which marks France's colonization of Algeria between 1830 and 1962 as a crime, because it accompanied mass killings, large-scale deportations, and it ended in a bloody war of independence, which killed almost 1.5 million people, even though, of course, French historians put that number lower. Now, I do want to say that the French President Emmanuel Macron has previously acknowledged that colonization of Algeria was a crime against humanity, but he has not offered an apology. And this is why you are seeing African nations like Johari coming out and you know, kind of like severing ties with the former colonial power. I suppose that probably should have been in the good news story, to be honest with you. Yeah, that should have been in the good news. And the final story. Oh God, yeah, the final story. I mean, there's two stories in Nigeria. This is the last one. I don't even like calling his name, so I won't call his name. The orange one has ordered strikes ordered strikes against Islamic State militants in northwest Nigeria during the Christmas period. Remember, I said that I was feeling a little bit down. It's because what was happening was that one by one, these violence acts were taking place. And he announced it on his True Social platform after making noise about the targeting of Christians in Nigeria. Now, this fake claim that people like Trump, I said his name, people like the Orange One really care about the plight of Africans on the continent, and especially those who are Christians, and that the US is there to protect them. It's a complete lie. I think we spoke in the last program about the hypocrisy in Azania, where it's created a pathway for Europeans to leave Azania and come to America. Azania is the traditional name for South Africa. So it's allowed for the Boers and the Afrikaners, as they call themselves, to leave. The people like Elon Musk to come to America, saying that they're fleeing a genocide, which is not true. But any other migrants, if you heard the outrageous and disgusting comments he's made about Somalis, and the consistent, persistent, Somalia, of course, is another nation that's been banned, the visas have been stopped. You'll see that he's just a white supremacist and it's clearly racist. Now, what we do know about this strike that took place over the Christmas period was that it was done in partnership with Nigerian authorities. And I'm very suspect about that. Not that I'm suspect that they cooperated, because even though Pete Hegseth, who is the US, he called himself Secretary of War, initially made a comment saying he's grateful for the Nigerian government's support and cooperation, even though he deleted it afterwards. I do believe that there was a level of cooperation, and I think that was a wrong thing to do. Now, the Nigerian Foreign Ministry has said that strikes were conducted as part of ongoing security cooperation with the US, which involves sharing intelligence to target militant groups. And I think that's how they probably started it. But I suspect that they knew it was coming. So this getting into bed with the devil is not going to end well. So, I'm going to leave this section with that, because that's what's taking place in the world. Oof, that's the world news. Okay, almost done. So let me take one more sip. So that is. Thank you for being with me. I can see there's some comments coming up. As I said, that they're automatically coming on screen. I can't control them, so it's fine. So thank you for sharing and communicating with each other. You are watching the Gaddy's Pan-African Community News Update. Hopefully by the next time of the broadcast, myself or Leander, our children will be feeling well, and I won't be so. If you can sense something in my throat and a little bit of tinge of anger in my voice, I'm a bit annoyed about some of the things that are taking place in the world. I wanted to start 2026 on a positive, but it looks like we're going to have to deal with a new variant of naked imperialism, and we're going to have to deal with it. We can't allow it to fester and to grow. So you are watching the Gaddy's Pan-African Community News Update. It's the last section, as ever. There's a couple of stories, so it's not much longer. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share this, this broadcast with anyone you think might find it useful. And I'm going to share some of the positive news relating to our community over the past few weeks. In fact, what I will start, I don't know if I mentioned it. I wouldn't have mentioned it because we went in January. There is this excellent exhibition at the Tate Modern, which is an exploration of African art. If you get a chance, you must go before it closes down. It's amazing. But yeah, there's other things going on and stuff like that. But that's one thing I forgot to say, and it's not on the slide, so I wanted to say that out loud. There's also an exhibition at UCL's Bartlett, and in the Bartlett, it's a Pan-African exhibition. I think it's there for a few more days. So I think it's like the 22nd it's going to close down. And again, if you're interested in Pan-African discourses and the sharing of wisdoms, I think they have it in their main exhibition space, so that you can check that out, which is, you just get off at Euston, it's there. What else have I seen? I can't remember. Stuff will come back to me. It's really weird because during the December period, when everything slows down, that's the only chance I get to go out and actually just take in some cultural, hopefully to see films and exhibitions and stuff. But I want to keep going on. Okay, so again, I'm not going to pretend I know a lot about football, but I do know that Chelsea has appointed the Strasbourg manager Liam Rosnior as their new head coach. I'm assuming this is a big thing. I don't know. All I do know is that he's 41 years of age. He joined the club on a 5.5-year deal with an option for a further season. And he said, "I'm extremely humbled and honoured to be appointed head coach of Chelsea Football Club. To be entrusted with this role means the world to me, and I want to thank all involved for the opportunity and faith in undertaking this job. I will give everything to bring the success this club deserves." And so we hope the brother has a good ride and that he doesn't get thwarted by the racism that exists in football and across Europe. The next good news story is one of the UK's youngest entrepreneurs who's now doing so well that he's funding his boarding school fees with his earnings. Now, as you can see his image, this young teenager by Malachi Conte, he kickstarted his entrepreneurial journey at the tender age of 6 and now pays his £4,000 per term school fees with his earnings. He's now 13. He embarked on his business venture by selling plants outside his father's office, spurred on by the advice that he needed to save up if he aspired to become a chorister. Now, I had to go online to find out what a chorister is when when our researchers shared this story with me, and it seems to be someone who's in a choir. So, it's an amazing story. I couldn't make this stuff up. He's now not only achieved his dream, but also made history as the first African heritage chief chorister in nearly a millennium-long history of Chichester Cathedral. So this is like an amazing, enterprising young person. He came from Surrey, that's where he's based. He's built his own mini business empire along the way, boasting 2 well-known branches and employing both his parents. Yes, that's right. He employs his parents. He collaborates with his mother and grandmother to cook and sell authentic Caribbean dishes from his flagship store in Crystal Palace, as well as from his home. And from his hard-earned profits, which not only contribute towards his £4,000 per term scholarship fees, because he's a full-time boarder at the school, he also indulges in committing to giving back by donating a portion of his profits to various charities. And yes, he does treat himself to the occasional gadget. He's still a young man. It's an amazing story, and hopefully you too will see this as positive news. I'm not one who's into capitalism, but I do love the idea of someone, of our young people, being entrepreneurial and giving back and doing it in a way that is so positive that he can even employ his parents and stay true by selling our own cultural dishes. It's a fantastic story. And the final story for this week is one that's not based in the UK, it's based in the US, but again, it's something to think about, kind of like often what happens in America. Remember, they have African History Month in February, while we have it in October. The Galleys policy is that we do it in both months. We don't have to have one or the other. We can do International African History Month in February and the UK version of, or European-wide African History Month in October. There's nothing, nothing to do that. Oh, there's another story I forgot. I was going to put a slide in as well. I'll talk about that afterwards. This is the story about the US Postal Service, which is finally honoring Phyllis Wheatley. And she's the first author of African heritage in the American colonies to publish a book. Now, this 49 stamp in what's called the Black Heritage series is free and open to the public at an event for everyone to check out. Now, the news of the stamp is being shared with the hashtag Black Heritage Stamp. So if you type in hashtag Black Heritage Stamp, you'll get more details about this. Of course, like I said, this is American news, to our cousins in the States. And, so I'm sharing this. I don't know it as in depth as I would normally. But just so if you don't know about Phyllis Wheatley, a bit of background, she was born in West Africa and brought to Boston on a slaver ship. She was clearly enslaved but educated in the Wheatley household. She published her first collection of poems on various subjects, religious and moral, in 1773. And this particular collection showcased her impressive mastery of various poetic forms, including hymns, elegies, narrative verse, and it secured her place in history. Now, she was freed from enslavement that same year, and she went on to correspond with figures such as George Washington, who praised her poetic talent. Now, her legacy continues to inspire generations, earning her the title of the Mother of African American Literature. And before the Civil War, abolitionists used her accomplishments to affirm the intellectual capacities of people of African heritage and argue against slavery. So in many ways that people in the UK talk about Mary Prince, or in particular Olaudah Equiano, because of his accomplishments in publishing his book. In the States, it's Phyllis Wheatley. There's a statue to her that was included in a new Boston Women's Memorial in 2003. The first full-length scholarly biography was published in 2011, with a second biographical study published in 2023. So she's there's a legacy and there's a building of her. When I say building, a building of information around her accomplishments, which is something to be celebrated. And this stamp, this heritage stamp, is just another way to do that. So yeah, this is good news. The other story, which I don't have a slide for, which I had to apologize for, is this week I went to the celebration of Hackney Archives being recognized as a registered archive. Now, this, I don't get all technical and I can't remember exactly all the details. Hackney Archive, for those who don't know, was under threat when the council wanted to build a new library in Hackney, in Dalston in particular. They wanted to remove the CLR James name. And our sister Andrea and brother Ngoma fought that campaign, you know, with everything they had. This is before the days of Twitter and social media and stuff like that. They launched a magnificent campaign. Those two should go down in history from what they did. And Andrea Enisu, who's now an ancestor, and they saved the name. And that's another story. You're talking with CLR James's wife, etc., and embarrassing the council. So we now have the CLR James in Hackney, in Dalston. But if you go to that library and you go upstairs, there's a floor dedicated to the archive. In fact, there's more than one floor, but because there's the store, but there's a floor, public space to the archives. And one of the managers, there's a great team there who works there. But one of the managers is our own beloved Dr. Etienne Joseph. And you may know him from the work he does, the fantastic work he does with Sister Connie at decolonizing the archives. But what's happened is that the archive is now a registered archive, which means that it has a level, a status that's beyond just being a regular archive, but it's a space that is safe for us to store our narratives, our stories. It says that it preserves it not only technically with care, which is the basic function of any archive, but it means that it excels in the way that it communicates those stories to the public. It excels in the way that it provides access to the public to get that information. And I can say this with my hand on heart that this is true, not just because I know Etienne and I admire the work that he does, but because, you know, I think it was last year or the year before, I remember having to go there to see an exhibition. Remember, archives don't generally do exhibitions. It's like the BCA in Brixton. But, you know, what they can do at times, and the ones that are most progressive, is that they can take, you know, collections, create a story, a theme that showcases a particular issue, and then communicate the public at large, you know, on this story. And I remember going there, you know, like I said, I think it was last year, if not the year before, on police brutality in Hackney, because it's an archive that deals with local history. And some of the things I've been talking about when we talk about you know, Colin Roach and the campaign and the inquiry that was led by the family and the supporters group was inside there. When I talk about the corruption of Stone Newington Police Station, this was an amazing exhibition, and yeah, for them to be rewarded was a good thing. I don't like validation by the state. I don't look for validation for the state for approval, but it was nice to see people getting their flowers. So I'm sorry, I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to add a slide for that. And I just ran out of time. And, you know, of course, I'm doing caring duties at the same time, running up and down. But I didn't want to let this week go without saying that. There's been a lot of other things that I've been able to duck in and out of. You know, I mean, obviously now I'm back, it's term time. I have no capacity again. But yeah, please go out. And that's the other thing you can do. If you find out events that are taking place, you know, that's still going to be running when we broadcast in 2 weeks' time, you're always welcome to email us and let us know. And then I'll try and put that into the program at the end so people can kind of check it out, but you had to watch the timings to make sure it's still running by the time that we broadcast. Anyway, my voice is literally going, so I'm going to shut up now. So thank you for joining us for the first program of 2026. As ever, I want to thank Sister Angie, Brother Colin, Sister Anna, everyone for their research, and all those who sent stories to us. You can see that we're drafting and taking other sources and recognize those who are doing some great work, like The Source and like Black Current News. This is very important that we support our independent journalists and activists and presenters. Our next broadcast is on Sunday, the 1st of February, same time, 6 p.m. In between then and now, please don't agonize. There's work to be done. Feel free to join a collective, obviously a Pan-African organization, if you don't know what to do, how to help, how to support. And as ever, let me see if there's any comments here. I'm going to say, thank you. I can see some comments here saying, get well soon, Oleander, we love you. We appreciate your work, Prophet. Thank you. I can see that here. And again, good evening, Dr. Toyin. Always appreciate your updates, sir. Great stuff, Ramon from Bristol. Thank you. It's so lovely to see some of your comments. I'm sorry that I couldn't interact as the program's going. It's just too difficult for me to do both at the same time. Let's see what this year brings. Be safe, be good. And as ever, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.